Welcome, everybody, back to the Friar Talk podcast and YouTube channel. For today's episode, we are actually going to be talking about Tony Gwynn. And I don't believe we've discussed Tony Gwynn briefly, but I don't think we've ever done a segment on Tony Gwynn. Obviously, a younger generation of Padres fans. So, unfortunately, we did not get a chance to actually watch him live. But going to be fun to talk about Tony Gwynn a little bit today. Unfortunately, we're talking about it in kind of a weird context in terms of ESPN and a couple other sites, but more talking about ESPN's today. They dropped a top 100 list for the top MLB players of all time. Now, Tony Gwynn fell at 44th on that list. I think, yes, top 50 is probably where he should be. Probably not top 25. But we're going to be going over a good amount of people that are ahead of him that we just do not agree with. And ultimately, we think he should be at least top 40, probably top 35. But also just kind of wanted to talk about the greatness of Tony Gwynn today. So, Isaac, you want to start it out and just kind of go through this list of who are the guys that are ahead of Tony Gwynn and kind of what we think about some of these guys and just, maybe some question marks that we have of Tony Gwynn should be ahead of this guy.
Yeah, so I don't know how many times I've gone on Twitter and seen if Tony Gwynn would have batted 0 for 100 or 1,000 in his last 100 or 1,000 at bats, he still would have batted above 300. Or if you take out, I forgot what it was. But there was another one where, dude, he only struck out 3 times once. 3 times once in his whole career. Most people do that some people do that in back-to-back games. Like, that's one of the craziest things about Tony Gwynn is that though he didn't hit a lot of home runs, when you think about the art of hitting, him, Ted Williams, and Pete Rose were probably all, the pinnacle of that. The guys that you think of that you could put like on the Mount Rushmore of just pure hitters, guys that aren't gonna hit a bunch of jacks. I mean, on command, yeah, Tony could probably hit some. I've seen clips of him hitting nukes, but he just wasn't that type of hitter. He was the type of hitter. The 5.5 hole was his favorite hole. That was his favorite spot to hit in between third baseman and the shortstop. And he did that with prowess. And it was funny because, for anyone who knows, he was a baseball coach at San Diego State. And I used to watch his drills all the time about how he would try and work with the pitch and try and just take the outside pitch the other way and work on the tee all the time. And like just hearing what he had to say about hitting, it was like, I don't really know what to say. It was like hearing, like, it was like a real pro, something that you would never expect to hear like from anyone else. Like, so I mean, looking at some of the guys that are on this list, you got George Brett. I think that's deserving. I think it's debatable. Whoever wants to debate it, of course, it's a good debate. There's Nolan Ryan. Yes, of course, I put Nolan Ryan ahead. Satchel Paige. I don't know. I didn't get to watch them. Jimmy Fox played in the 1920s. The thing Matt and I were talking about were some of these guys just did not play in the same, like anywhere close to the same era. I think there was, like, way back then was an era where it wasn't very competitive. And, if you stood out even a little bit, you looked a lot better than you probably would in today's game. For example, there was someone that we were talking about. Who were we talking about that played like in the 1900s? Tris Speaker? Was that who it was? That played like in 1907. And I think it's completely unfair to compare someone from 1907 to somebody who, quite frankly, is the only reason a franchise was cool to begin with. A franchise made the World Series. And of course, it wasn't only him. Ken Caminiti, Steve Finley, Kevin Brown, no discredit to those guys, but they had arguably one of the best hitters, if not the best hitter ever on their team. I feel like somebody who's the best player ever in a franchise, so far by like a mile, does not deserve to be so low on the list. There's a couple guys that are really low on the list. And I look throughout the list. I see Mike Trout at 15. I see Ken Griffey Jr. at 11. I see A-Rod at 26. I see Jeter like way too high.
Pujols,
way too low at 30. I see, like, it's insane. I see Mariano Rivera at like 31. Why? I mean, if there's any Yankees fans or any Mariano Rivera diehards, like, look, he pitched an inning. And I know it's probably the most important inning of the game, but give me the guy who batted over 300 for his career, like in the 330s, over a guy who pitches one inning. all day, every day of the week. Somebody that I could probably put atop of my lineup and is almost guaranteed to give me a hit almost 4 times out of 10. Yeah, give me that every day of the week over a guy who's going to pitch 1 inning. I mean, sure, he's going to help you out a lot, but there's always tone setters in lineups, and Tony Gwynn is absolutely one of them. And when you consider this guy's one of the greatest hitters, if not the greatest hitter in MLB history, 44 is absurd.
Yeah, I'm there with you. And I'll go through a couple of these other guys. So looking at it, I think the guys that I thought that Tony should be ahead of, let me find it real quick. Okay, so 43 George Brett, I don't know if you guys are hearing this commercial. Sorry. Commercial's going off in my ear. So you got George Brett. I think you can make that argument for George Brett, but I think there's a discussion to be made. And if you're going to go Tony, I think it's fair. But you can also go George Brett. Nolan Ryan, I'd probably rock with Nolan Ryan ahead of Tony Gwynn. Satchel Paige, going Tony Gwynn on that one. Jimmy Fox, yes, this dude hit absolute bombs. He played in the 20s, the 30s, and the 40s. So I'm going to say that I'm going to rock with Tony on that one. Even though he has really good numbers, I still think Tony was more valuable, more important to the league, and overall a better player. Yogi Berra, I think the name value is definitely there, but it's hard to make the case for Yogi Berra over Tony Gwynn when you look at the numbers. Jackie Robinson, yeah, I'm going to go Jackie. Joe Morgan, this one is a little interesting. I mean, I know he was really, really good, but I probably wouldn't go Joe Morgan. So I'd probably go with Tony on that, but I think it's close. Another one you can debate, kind of like George Brett. Tris Speaker, gonna go Tony. Josh Gibson, I don't even believe he played in the MLB. So that doesn't really make any sense. And he did play in what was called the Negro Leagues, which I think they included those stats on here because obviously that was a horrible thing that happened. And the fact that they're not even able to be like all those players are not able to be like in this discussion, I think is super messed up. But I don't think it makes much sense when you're making a top 100 list to include a different league, especially because this isn't top 100 baseball players. This is top 100 MLB players. So I don't get that argument there. Then we got Pete Rose. I think Pete Rose, I don't know. I think that you'll probably go Pete Rose, but they're also super similar players and super similar accolades. But I'd probably go Pete Rose just because he did hit 4,000 hits. Bob Gibson had some elite top end ball. So I could see that case. Sandy Koufax, same deal there. He did not play that long, but he was a very, very good player. And then at 31 and 30, we got Mariano Rivera and Albert Pujols. I think Albert Pujols should be way higher on this list. But Mariano Rivera, Isaac, I'm pretty much just going to second what you said. I'm totally with you. You're picking, okay, Mariano Rivera, this is not to like discredit him at all, but greatest closer of all time. Arguably greatest hitter of all time. Top 3 lock to be one of those top 3 guys of the best hitter of all time. I'm going to go with the hitter on that one. I have to go with the hitter on that one. I don't think it makes any sense to not go with the hitter. So I think you can move him up. That'd probably put him in the top 35, which I think is huge. But I don't know. That's where I feel like he should be. And I just feel like and not just with Tony, but with other guys too. Like Pujols, I think that's pretty ridiculous. 30? Like really? We're going to look at Pujols' prime and we're going to go, yeah, him on the Cardinals. Like, come on, that was special. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of this list that is a little iffy.
There's a lot of people that consider Mike Trout the greatest baseball player of all time. I think our generation specifically considers Mike Trout the greatest baseball player of all time, and he's number 15 on this list. Ken Griffey Jr., one of the most electrifying players ever, was one of the guys that engineered the changing of the game, brought swag to the game. And he was amazing. In a time when everyone was taking performance-enhancing drugs, he didn't, and he was still possibly the best player in baseball. Is that outside of the top 10? Mariano should not. I guess he could be in the top 50. He shouldn't be in the top 30 or in the top 35. Like I said, he pitches 1 inning, and I know, you could bring up numbers. Oh, he had a 0.7 ERA in the postseason. You could tell there's so much East Coast bias in this with how many Yankees are on this list that are way too high. Derek Jeter's too high. Mariano Rivera, I think the biggest case of East Coast bias was Mariano Rivera being the first unanimous Hall of Famer. That's East Coast bias at its finest. So, and like discrediting Tony Gwynn for what he did. I looked up. I'm reading the article again. In 2,440 games, he struck out 3 times once. That's what I brought up earlier. 3 times once. He compiled 541 plate appearances against 18 Hall of Fame pitchers and batted 331. He batted 331 against 18 Hall of Fame pitchers in almost 600 appearances, or 550, sorry, with a 371 on base percentage and a 426 slugging percentage. Against Greg Maddox, everybody knows Greg Maddox. He batted 415. That's crazy. Like, when you're putting up those kind of numbers against Hall of Fame pitchers, I think that kind of shows that you would be able to withstand the test of time. I think he'd be able to compete in this generation. I think he'd be able to compete in any generation because, like I said, he wasn't the type of hitter that was just going to hit bombs. That's kind of what today's game is. But he was going to be able to hit any part of the field he wanted to. He had such amazing back control where he could take the pitch wherever it was pitched. He could take it to left field if it goes outside. And I think that's kind of something that we don't really see in today's game. We see a lot of pull happy hitters. That's not to say they aren't great ball players. They're amazing ball players. There's not a lot of ball players that will take the pitch where it's pitched to you. But that's the thing with Tony, is that he was such an amazing hitter, arguably top 3 hitter ever, arguably the best hitter ever is what I meant to say. And at 44, you're kind of just doing yourself a disservice, honestly, because you're not making yourself look credible with that.
So one thing I got to add before we take off, because I do think it's really interesting and it is fun to talk about Tony Gwynn. You brought up Greg Maddox. Just for reference, Greg Maddox is number 14 on this list. So apparently Greg Maddox is a better baseball player than Mike Trout. That's crazy to say. That's crazy. But anyways. And I'm big on Greg Maddox. I think that's a fine spot for him. But like you should see Mike Trout ahead of some of these other guys in front of Greg Maddox as well. But I'll attach this list as well. I'll put the link in the description, or not in the description, in the comments. But the Greg Maddox quote about Tony Gwynn is one of my favorite sports quotes. He was talking about, can a hitter like basically like determine of the speed, able to like figure out what's happening with the baseball when the pitch is coming, like in that split second, right? He said, you just can't do it. Sometimes hitters can pick up differences in spin. They can identify pitches if they are different release points, or if a curveball starts with an upward hump as it leaves a pitcher's hand. But if a pitcher can change speeds, every hitter is helpless, limited by human vision, except for that, insert cuss word, Tony Gwynn. One of the best quotes ever. So Tony Gwynn, one of the best hitters ever. Ted Williams on this list, I think, is 5. So I think that Tony should be high. Just considering kind of their games, I think that Tony should be a lot higher than 44 if Ted Williams is 5. So I don't know. That's where I'm at. I think a lot of these guys that, I don't know, just this shouldn't have been ahead of Tony. And not to like kind of knock on their games or anything, but Tony is a great, great player. And if you hear what Craig Maddox has to say, I think that quote kind of says it all. But Isaac, anything else you want to add before we take off?
Tony Gwynn led the league in batting average 8 times, hit 7 times, had a 454 on base percentage at one point, but he's only 45. Dude, especially in an era when there are so many good players, if you're leading the league 8 times in batting average and 7 times in hits, come on, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, also one of like the most exciting times in baseball history too. I feel like one of I know it's the steroid era, so it has like a negative connotation to it, but like that's a very, very exciting time for the sport too. And there is so much talent in the league at that time as well. We bring up Bonds, Griffey, like those are the other guys that were playing, Greg Maddox, like a lot of super top end players were in the league. So I think it's another point to bring up as well, because you bring up those accolades. Those are super, super impressive. But
not to mention though, that team they faced in the World Series, the second go around for Tony Gwynn, is arguably the greatest team in MLB history. That team was insane. So that team was one of the best. And then you brought up all of the amazing players back in the day. Yeah, that is one of the most top-loaded eras in the MLB. Even if steroids were around, like there were just so many good players back then, man. And the fact that he was able to compete for not only for like 10 years, it was his whole career that he was able to be one of the best hitters in baseball. So for 20 straight years, if you're doing it for 20 straight years, man, that's something that is rarely seen.
Yeah. So got to give Tony some love. But with that said, they're going to take off. So thank you all for listening. And we'll be back bringing you guys content, Padres content tomorrow. So talk to you.